Good evening and welcome to episode 17 of the Above Average Joe's podcast. I'm Kyle and with me as always is Heath up there, and over here is Matt, and we're here for your listening and sports enjoyment. How are you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good, Neil.
Well, I'm getting sick of only leaving my house to go to work, so that, yeah, it's getting a little tiring. Kind of miss some normal social contact would be nice. It's nice to talk to you guys. It's been a week. I haven't really talked to either of you guys since last Monday, so it's a pleasure seeing your faces. Certainly not pretty, but how have you guys been?
Yeah.
How have you guys been?
Hold it together. Yeah.
Keeping it on the rails.
I'm still working, right? And work's really stupid busy still, but it's starting to normalize. And yeah, we're not practicing in the evenings with bands and stuff, so I have a little bit of chance to do some creating, and maybe we'll end up with the long-awaited second Parlor Tricks album after all this is said and done.
Wow, if you can only imagine. Well, at least we've got something, so hope that turns out.
There might be a rainbow at the end of all the rain.
That's right.
I left the house and left my piece of property, I guess you could say. I've been outside a couple of times, but working from home. The wife's working from home. We go out for groceries basically every 10 days or so. We've been out twice since we've been in here. Really haven't gone anywhere. The kids have been doing their homework and all that kind of stuff. It's getting a little stir crazy, and I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, if I get through about a month of this, I might just roll some dice here. I don't know. People are going to get antsy, especially extroverted people. I think that,
or your habits will change by the end of it.
Yeah, well, you never know. Some spending habits, I think, are going to change for a lot of people, though, too. So
absolutely,
it's going to be a bloody eye opener in a lot of ways.
Well, I think this is going to be I laugh when everybody talks about this getting back to normal. I don't think it's ever going to get back to the way it was, right? Normal is going to be something much different by the time this is all quote unquote over.
Yeah. So, and then even talking about a vaccine or any of that kind of stuff in a year, 18 months. Okay, say that happens. That's great. That's a big step for everybody in terms of taking a load off your mind. But the other step is the economic impact will be far greater in 18 months, and we'll still be feeling it. We'll still be figuring it out.
Yeah, we're gonna feel this for a while. Yeah.
And we were on the verge of a recession, if not already kind of sliding into one. This basically guarantees we're going to be in one, and then unemployment is going to be high, and it's going to be that impact, and that pain is going to outlast potentially the pain of the virus itself. So if we even get a vaccine in the next 12 to 18 months, but lots of good stories out there as to things are happening in that regard.
Yeah, it's still a crazy time, man, but let's try and take everybody a little bit away from that, which we can't really, but we'll try our best. So, Matt, what are we talking about on today's show?
So hey, checking out the big people news out there. Happened upon it just so happens to be, if we can go from one awful story to another, 2 years since the Humboldt Broncos bus accident where 16 people I think were killed and 13 injured. How the people involved recovered since then, and what's changed in both our worlds and theirs since. Heath?
Right on.
Then we'll talk a little CFL. I think we'll get into what happens if the season is suspended. There's some word that the players could all be released from their contracts as per the agreement with the CFLPA and the league. everybody maybe being a free agent at the same time, how that all works, and what our regular Joes like us think about it, and what is it going to maybe even mean for the league, short term, long term. So
beauty. That's going to be
we will dissect.
That'll be speculate-a-palooza.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much any sport. That's all we can do right now. But.
That's right.
So
what else we got, Matt?
Even the NFL has admitted that they're not necessarily going to start on time. Their doctor came out this week and cited some of the conditions that they're going to have to meet in order to return to play.
Right.
And so it's not cut and dried that even the NFL is going to make it back. When are we going to see live sports come back?
Well, when we get to that, we'll talk about who said that it is going to start on time. And, well, we know that when they say something, it happens. And what else do we got, Heath, to end off the show?
A little bit of just a few other sports. I guess the NBA is talking about a horse competition. NASCAR E-Sports, some rebroadcasts of sports. Other ways maybe people are going to start getting their sports fixed.
Right on. That's a pretty nice open topic for the end of the show. It could turn into like a 3-hour show with us. If you leave it that open-ended.
Creating some human adult conversations.
Yeah.
These sports-related ones. So anyway, yeah, Maddie had brought up the Humboldt bus crash there. So 2 years since that sad day.
That was
past that memorial, that site, the crash site, a few times, and the kids, when we went past there the one time, were like, Dad, we should stop, get pictures. And I'm like, I get why you do, but I also kind of get why a guy doesn't. And it's like, It's not really a tourist attraction. It's not like, you're going to Disney and you're standing, make like.
Yeah, stop and pay your respects, but you don't really need to capture that moment. It should be captured in your mind.
But even stopping and paying your respects, it's like, I don't want to really walk through the memorial. And
yeah, I'm not that type of person either. But if I happen to be driving past, I certainly, as I drove past, that would be on my mind for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And I don't know, to me, it's like, I get why some people do it. They want to take a look. They're curious. Not saying it's wrong. It's just, for me personally, like going past that spot, I stopped and we did look at it from the road kind of thing, but it's just, it kind of feels like walking through a cemetery. It's, like a grave site. And I don't know, do you really, how comfortable are you walking through there, right? Especially when they're not your next of kin either, right? So you can still pay your respects, in my opinion, and do it however you feel you need to do it. But for me, I just, I go by, I nod my head, start thinking about hockey and players and like the whole encompassing community sort of aspect of it too. So that community is not recovered, but I think they did a remarkable job. So in terms of where they are now, it's always going to hurt, but I think some lessons were learned. So you had mentioned on kind of the outline here, Maddie, about some of the rules and things that you kind of feel have changed maybe for the better. If you want to maybe touch on some of your thoughts there.
Well, the one thing that I really wanted to bring up actually was to do with the way they adjusted some of the trucking rules and regulations and strengthened them. Did some unification between jurisdictions to make it easier to enforce and less ambiguous. But I just heard in the last week that our provincial government has helpfully now relaxed some of those rules again in the wake of the COVID outbreak in order to move product. And it's like, I get where you're going with that, but doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of the rules? Like, the rules are there so that people get there in one piece, right? Like if somebody gets killed while you're trying to deliver a box full of fucking masks, what good is it, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's, the store shelves, there's the demand is there. It's not going away. They got to get that stuff out. But at the same time, it's like, if you can't do it safely, then yeah, like.
Right. And like, what's a few extra hours? And I mean, you know for a fact that the trucking industry is going to, I mean, if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. Every veteran trucker out, right? Every veteran trucker out there, I guarantee you, has 2 logbooks, and they'll all tell you they don't, but they do. And I've witnessed guys getting chewed out because they legally ran out of hours because they didn't know how to work their logbook right. I'm like, really? Is this how it's supposed to work?
Well, you worked in that business.
And they upped the qualifications and made it more stringent qualifications in order to get the full license to drive, like almost more of like an apprentice type situation where you got to spend a little bit of time, and prove yourself before you kind of get the whole badge to wear on your sleeve kind of thing. So, I mean, I understand for the temporary part of it to some degree why they did it, but it doesn't follow the normal logic, and that's kind of, like, to me that's kind of a baffling thing too. Like, from this tragedy you learn that lesson. You shouldn't unlearn the lesson, if that makes sense. Like,
that was kind of my thought, was like, didn't we just figure this out, that we need to maybe pay more attention to these sorts of things?
So if you take that same logic, okay, and we're going to apply it because of the pandemic, okay, we'll apply it to the pandemic, right? And there's talk of getting, certain PPE from China, and other countries have gotten it from China. And it's not of the right quality. It doesn't actually pass the inspection for quality. Now, when you have a shortcoming in quality, how do you find that? Inspection, right? Having stringent rules around what qualifies as good or bad. And if you take that qualification away, what does that potentially result in? Death? Bringing harm to people? Well, that's sort of the thing here.
Right?
You lessen the qualification all of a sudden. You lessen the safety aspect of it, or you skimmed over some of the safety. It's close enough. People get harmed in that situation. So if you just take the same logic and apply it in terms of the reasoning behind why they changed the rule, it doesn't actually measure up on a lot of different aspects as to this rule. The number one thing, everyone's staying home, right? It's safety. Well, is this not a rule that was made to keep people safer?
Absolutely. It was designed to save lives.
It doesn't follow the same logic, which I don't like. And it has a very valid reason as to why it's in there. And we can probably all remember some real Wild West semi drivers. I got ran off the road one time when I was 23 by a fuel truck. He was on the wrong side of the road. Okay. And I'm coming down the road and I'm like, well, what do I do? Do I go to the other side of the road? And pretty soon he's in the middle of the road. Right? And I'm like, oh shit, now what? I took the ditch. And I got stuck actually in the bottom of the ditch where it was a little muddy in my sports car. But at the same time, the bastard fell asleep. So you're kind of like, okay, he didn't hit me. He didn't crash the truck. But how far does he go before he realizes he fell asleep doesn't remember the last 10 miles? Or it's a little groggy. Like, that's how people get hurt. And to me, you're talking about 2 logbooks and that kind of thing. You're like, I mean, they're not necessarily just hitting a bus. They can hit anything. They can hurt themselves. So,
well, and some of them are just terrible drivers, even without being asleep.
Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? So
I saw one leaving Longman today. It was, he thought he was in a race car for some reason. He was in the inside lane. Somebody in front of him was turning, but he was going so fast that he actually pulled out and then right back in the lane like he's a goddamn Ferrari.
Yeah, no, they on the 2 lanes, some of them are in and out, and you're like, dude, you can't NASCAR this shit. Like, what are you doing? But like, when I was going to school, like when I was going to SciAS and taking my one course there, I was chucking freight for 40 hours a week at a place here in town, and we get trucks in at like 4 in the afternoon, 2 in the morning. So you're chucking freight and unloading trucks. Well, there was literally guys, and these aren't B trains. These are just regular freight trucks. They could not back up to the dock, could not hit it. So you'd stand there. Like I literally stood there like sometimes for half hour, 40 minutes. And a couple of times they're like, they get out, they can't see, or the numerous excuses. And pretty soon it's like, hey, you want me to do it? And I did it probably 5, 6 times. And I'm just like, fuck, I got B trains on the farm. I don't have a 1A license, but
but I know how to back up
to an auger with a exactly. And it's
man,
those are mirrors, man. Left means right means left.
Oh,
but I mean, you're sitting there like, who is this guy? He just backed up my truck. And I'm like, dude, it's one trailer. There's no auger. There's no, your old man's not.
It's not that hard.
So, like, yeah, some of them are shitty drivers. Some are fantastic, right? Like, but yeah, it's all over the spectrum. But just back to the point, though. I mean, lessening the safety side of this whole thing. When everybody's being told to go home, be safe, be safe, be safe.
It's extremely counter the message.
It doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It's not lining up with the message. The other thing I thought, though, too, that was a lesson learned, and this was a big one for me. I've known quite a few people, not tons and tons, but I mean, I feel it's probably more than my fair share that have had, organ transplants. So the organ donation kind of process, I guess, if you will, has changed significantly. Not significantly, it's just a lot more streamlined, easier to do, right? And more encouraged. So I don't know if you guys are organ donors or if you have your cards marked in the right way to be one. But to me, it's like, man, you know how many lives can be saved from organ donation?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Tons.
For sure.
Tons. So as much as there were 13 or 16 killed on the bus, those organs potentially could have saved more than 16 people. Mm-hmm. So, the net of human life is potentially there. There's a net positive to the whole thing.
Wow.
Right? So,
and for what it's worth, when it's 16 high-level junior hockey players,
yeah, those are
their
some good
organs
organs.
are probably in good shape compared to an old guy like me with wrecked pieces.
Nobody
right?
wants your organs, Matt. Believe me. No, yours are worn out.
That's what she said.
Oh. It's all defective.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody can be a Chevy, I guess. So. Anyway, no, but I mean, just in terms of those young men that died, though, and their organs potentially going to more than 16 people, that's a net. But it also inspires so many more to do it. So there's a
net
for sure
positive to society, to life in general, right? So to me, we're all about saving human lives and preserving life and being safe right now. Like, what came of that to me, given the current situation, it's like there's that human life,
I've been
positive for society. So
I've been arguing with people for much longer than before the tragedy about organ donorship, and you'd be surprised at the excuses that people don't want to put that sticker on their car, on their driver's license or health card, just to, like, what are you gonna do with them? You could save.
I find that absolutely.
It's insanity.
It's the narcissism. It's the greed of it all, right? Like, it's mine.
It's almost like anti-vaxxers.
Well, let's not go down that road, but maybe we can.
I was poking you a little bit.
I know. It's all good. I'm not an anti-vaxxer for anybody watching. Anyway.
But yeah, this
the whole
a lot of good things have come out of a tragedy like that. It brought a province really close together. And it even brought a country really close together, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's just another great example of not just the prairie spirit, but I mean the Canadian spirit, right? That whole idea where tragedy really does bring us together.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you know what? It's a little funny part of that though too, with the whole thing when it was going on 2 years ago. Do you guys realize how many of those TSN guys are Saskatchewan boys?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know
Like,
Dusty is.
yeah, on dregs. Like, I mean, there was numerous Saskatchewan media people from Saskatchewan that
Randorf
came
was.
home, so to speak, right? And like it was pretty neat. So, I mean, for
Hey,
some of
Gareth.
them, I think it may have been a unique experience too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not that these bus crashes happen very often, so being able to cover it and being back home, and like there must have been a certain sense of nostalgia for some of them though too, right? So in terms of being back home and seeing some familiar places and faces in that regard. So despite that it took a tragedy to get them to come back, I guess. But yeah, to me it was the organ donation though. That was kind of the big one for
Mm-hmm.
me. I
Yeah,
totally agree with
absolutely.
Matt though. The trucking safety rules on the road and kind of how those are being relaxed was kind of another one. So
And apparently they've done a lot to that intersection as well
yeah, no, that's true. That's
to try and
true.
make it safer. So
Um,
did
but
did you
having been
guys?
there though,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just sorry. I was going to move on. I was
No,
going
go ahead.
to.
Yeah, yeah, move on.
I
Yeah,
was going
let's
to
do
ask
this Fell stuff.
if y'all had. Well, no, I was going to move on in this same discussion, and just one more point to hit was: did you guys hear recently about the lawsuit that's been launched with respect to this by the Strzezinski family?
No, I can't
No.
say I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Bring
Enlighten
I
us
us.
don't
up to
know if
speed.
it was just launched a week or two ago against the bus driver. What would be like the bus driver's estate or whatever, right? Um, the I think the Broncos, like just that whole when you do that blanket litigation because you're trying to find somebody that you can get the charges to stick through, like kind of like what Brad Horning did, right? Like they sued everybody from the helmet manufacturer
Right.
to the teams to the venue to the I don't know, like the medical staff, right? Like whatever they could sue, and then you see what sticks, right? So apparently they've done that, and I don't know. It's unfortunate that it happened so close to the the 2-year anniversary, but I would suspect that probably took some time to put together as well, right? So, but I don't
Well,
know
there's
how.
legal windows that close in a certain amount of time too. So
Yeah,
maybe the 2 year
it's
mark
usually two
was
years.
part of that, right?
Yeah,
So
there
So
you go.
is it okay? I've never been
yeah,
sued before.
I
Oddly enough.
unfortunately I've learned a little bit
Not for
about
libel
it,
yet, eh?
but yeah, I believe it's 2 years usually.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, the
Yeah,
timing
it's
is
unfortunate because
Yeah.
he's been absolutely nothing but a good news story, right? I mean, just his positivity and getting into the sledge hockey and stuff like that, and then just to hear his name at the end of that lawsuit was kind of like a little disappointing, I think. But um,
that depends where the advice is coming from and
right,
what
exactly,
it's really about.
exactly.
We
It's a
get
lot more
snippets, right?
complicated, and I don't really have the whole story, so. I'm not prepared to
I
judge one way or the other. I do think it's really unfortunate.
Yes, it's certainly
yeah, I
unfortunate.
just
It's like
Googled it here
adding
quick
insult to
and
injury.
Right, especially the bus driver. Like the
well,
truck driver was convicted, right?
Right.
yeah, he got a bit of a slap on the wrist as far as most people are concerned, I guess. But 8 years in prison is a pretty steep price, though. But I mean, 16 dead, like full on negligence, indisputably, his negligence in the whole thing. So I don't know. Tony Merchant is the lawyer and taken up the class action for $13.5 million. So
Shocker.
yeah, shocker on Merchant, I guess. But I mean, he's well versed at those things. He's done a fair amount of them. So I guess if you got to pick a guy, go with the guy with experience.
How many does he win?
Well,
Enough to make him a very wealthy man.
Part of it isn't maybe just the winning. It is also the fact that they got to do something though too, right? Like they kind of feel like this is maybe a little bit of part of the punishment, I guess, for some of these folks too. So I don't know. One family pulled out of the whole lawsuit though too. They don't want to be part of the class action, so they have their reasons, I guess. But yeah, no, it's unfortunate, that's for sure. So there's a lot of expenses though too with some of the guys who did make it in terms of long-term health. So it's not like that money's just going to be like, yeah, we're going to Vegas, that kind of. They're in need of the cash, right? There's been GoFundMe's and all that kind of stuff. So
that was exactly what I was going to say. Yeah,
I don't think they're doing it just to say, well, they want to do it. It's partially maybe a little bit of closure, partially the fact that they got pretty steep amount of bills to pay for some of these guys, and a complete adjustment to their lives, and that costs money too. So,
for sure, absolutely.
And being that young, there's a lot of life left.
Absolutely.
So,
we don't know. We don't know what it's all about. It's probably part of a much bigger picture.
Well, and so you have a situation where you've lost a child or whatever too. Like there's stages of grieving and whatnot that a person goes through. So, I mean, everybody has their reasons. So, we're not in a position to judge.
True that. But nope, not at all.
For sure.
Hopefully, they get what they're looking for.
All right.
CFL.
Yeah, let's move on to some sports that have kind of something maybe going on.
Well, there's news, I guess. But
there's at least they're talking about not doing things.
Well, so the story was out there that the CFL players could all become free agents if the season's canceled. There's a clause in a standard CFL contract that states basically if the operation of the league is suspended, the contract shall immediately be terminated. I don't know, does that mean they get paid?
Well, usually if something's terminated, you don't get paid.
Well, apparently it depends on whatever's in paragraph 11.
But is it
and what does suspended mean? And what does suspended mean?
I believe it means, I believe it means like when it, no, not that. I think they mean like when
form of it.
Like when a game is suspended, typically it means it's essentially canceled, right? Well, depending on the situation, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, the way I read that, I'm just wondering. So does this become like the Wild Wild West? Like it seems bizarre that all these clubs and players that thought they had, some mutual comfort. I mean, there's not as many as there used to be, but there are some, right? That at least thought they had a couple, 3 years, right? And now everybody's. I mean, what about the continuity on some of the teams?
Well, I think
if you got to rebuild, it's like a fantasy draft all of a sudden.
Well, to some degree, I guess, but I mean, the hard part to me is everybody's out there. Okay, they're all free agents. Well, that, like you said, that's the wild, wild west. It's anarchy. But I mean, do they get paid a portion? Is there a penalty clause when the contract's terminated? Like, how much money are these guys walking away with? Zero?
My guess is that it's individually negotiated, because this paragraph 11, my guess is that's where they iron out the X's and O's of how that works, right? But I mean, most guys don't get paid if they don't play, right?
That's how it works.
I mean, can the CFL afford to pay them and have no on-field product for the year? Like, say it goes to court or...
God, no.
It's basically the league's over. Like, they can't dish out $4 million a club, $5 million a club in salary.
And I guess maybe that's where everybody becomes a free agent. And you just once it starts up, you just reshuffle the deck. That'd be interesting.
How many come back? Like,
it'd be interesting.
That would be interesting.
The other side of it is So say everybody comes back to the same team, like every single guy comes back to the exact same team they left. How many of these guys can actually come back and
loyal
play?
like that.
I'm just saying in the hypothetical. But how many of them, though, in that situation can come back and actually play the game?
After
you got
sitting out a year.
Right. And I mean, Solomon Elimimian, I'll give you the CFLPA.
At the edge, at the tail end of his career.
Yeah.
Right, but he's the president of the CFLPA. He may not have a job to come back to because, I mean, who knows? Will he get re-signed? Can he take a year off in his mid-30s and come back ready to rock and play at a good level? There's guys that are at the end of their career that may not have any more career.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Or they're already preparing for the next phase of their career, and they may not come back because they got pushed into that next phase.
They just don't care. Yeah.
Right.
Scott
and then
Schultz.
There's also young guys who, you know, they got young families that they need to feed. Do you take the chance? Do you take the chance and come back for 50, 70, 80,000 a year or whatever, right? If you can make the same money, get settled in, have a family life, and I don't know, there's going to be players that just don't come back at all. Like they're careers, they're just going to say, see.
But teams will hold their rights until they retire, but they'll still hold the rights if they decide to not come back.
But how do you hold their rights if they don't hold the contract?
Well, that's the thing. If everybody's just all of a sudden every player in the CFL is now not under contract, well, wow, that's like what we just watched this spring.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah,
friggin' teams together, and you watch garbage for a year.
So what happens if you just take, say, guys who would have been free agents at the end of this year? You know, guys on 2-year, 3-year deals, still have a contract, still are owned by that club.
If we don't play a season, then I would assume, unless all the contracts are terminated, that they would be still under whatever terms of that contract was. Right? So if they had 2 years remaining, they'd still have 2 years remaining. Or do you think that that should be 1 year remaining?
Well, that's the thing. Do you?
Because I see the reasons for both of them.
I mean, that's something they're going to have to obviously negotiate, I think, as to, because there's no way I don't really see it where the players and the league think it would be a good idea to just have everybody on the street.
Oh my God, that would be insane.
It would be completely insane. Because I think for their clubs, they need to have a few faces, you know, on the roster, around town, whatever it is, to still have some way of promoting themselves as a product that's ready to come back at some point. Your front office people can't go out and sign 70, 80 guys in a couple of months or whatever. Like, we had a ton of free agents this year, and O'Day just got to the cutoff and re-signed a bunch of guys, the guys he wanted, which was a lot of them. But I mean, that's a lot of work. A lot of work. You just compounded that by 3-4 times.
Oh my God!
It can't be.
No, because
it's not reasonable.
We know how GMs work. They're projecting not just this coming off season. They're projecting the next off season and possibly this off season after that, and how it's going to work in a long-term plan. If you all of a sudden you take away all their cards, and now we're just going to give you whichever cards that you can get.
Can't imagine.
That'd be insane. But the odds of
this
this season,
you have less money.
Well, yeah.
Right. Cap can't go up in a year.
No,
you didn't have a product.
well, the thing is, everybody's going to have the same money, and I would assume that at the end of the day, the teams are going to look very similar, or at least.
But if you think you're $100,000 player, and the cap goes back 10%, 15%, well, you're actually an $85,000 player. But if you and your agent think you're a $100,000 player, it's going to be a lot harder negotiation to get you on pen to paper.
Okay, so I've got a question. Sure. Okay, so say the season is suspended, and everybody is, because of whatever they're out of their contract. So does that mean then that the PA no longer exists because there's 0 players under contract? And do they have to do a new bargaining agreement when you've basically said that this league ceases to exist and you're starting over?
Right. Yeah.
Well, if you're on strike, does the union cease to exist just because nobody's working?
No, but those players are
They're
under
all paying their
contract.
dues. They're all part of that, that union.
Yeah, but you're under
and
contract.
They have an exclusive.
I guess you're not under contract.
And they have players to represent.
I suppose that answers my question then.
Right? They would have no members.
The league itself is a unionized environment, so
yeah,
they can't just sign.
You'd have 0 members at that point.
Legal, right? But they'd have to be legally union members in order to sign them or become union members. So, I mean, it would just be crazy. I think they're going to have some time actually to sit down and talk about how they're going to work out some of this stuff, because I know it's wrote that way, but they both can't be thinking this is a good thing.
Well, this is not the first piece of text in this contract that they've had to massage later because it gave some kind of rules that somebody thought they had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, the unique part though too with the CFL is like the one thing they massaged was the bringing of American or NFL players back, that had played a few years down there, all that kind of stuff, and how much you can pay them, and there's a cap on that. Well, the CFL is a very unique league in a lot of ways, and this is just another way that they're going to have to figure out a way to massage things into.
Well, it seems like contract language that wasn't well thought out.
Well, it seems to me when I read it that it was designed more for the occasion that we were expecting to happen in the mid-90s, where the CFL just goes tits up, right?
Right. Well, yeah, ceases to exist.
Yeah, so that then you don't tie anybody to dead entities, right? And that's kind of what I'm gathering. I don't think anybody was expecting to, suspend operations for an entire season because of a global pandemic.
Right, but once again, poor language. It should have been. For lawyers, you'd think that they would have that all figured out, so there wasn't open to interpretation. But maybe that's why they did it that way.
Things, though. Well, but interestingly, did you hear that baseball has, if they end up having to not play the 2020 season, then apparently the 2020 season suspensions that were handed out,
right? They've done their time.
Yeah, are complete.
Yeah, that is both.
And so their punishment is exactly the
try
same
not to
as
swear
every other single player and manager in the league.
That is.
But it's not their fault, though, that the league.
But it's not everybody else's fault either.
You do have
right?
to actually serve some time.
You have to serve a punishment. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no punishment there.
The good part is that
unless you're a communist,
that punishment was handed out, though, right? He can hand it out again.
I suppose.
He really could.
Maybe.
But I bet you he doesn't.
Or is that the issue? Is it because they said you're suspended for the 2020 season? And that's that.
No, Major League Baseball wouldn't do anything like that.
Yeah, change the rules?
Baseball.
That's baseball.
But really,
that one made my jaw drop.
What are the odds, though, you guys think that there's going to be a CFL season?
I think they're decent.
Compared to last week?
Decent.
You think there's a better chance?
The beauty with the CFL, like I had mentioned last week, and even the NFL, those leagues start later, and their start date is not, well, the CFL more so, or, compared to the NFL, but they can push it back a month. They could push it back 2 months, and it isn't the same impact. They can get to their championship. They can find a reasonable way to do it. They have a lot of time to plan and manage those obstacles, right? Whereas you're trying to finish a season,
right,
and you're handcuffed to this whole pandemic, and you're at its mercy, and there's no definitive timelines on when it's going to end or how it's going to end, or any of that stuff.
So
So you're trying to crunch it in somewhere, and you're just not sure when you're going to get the opening to crunch it in there, right?
So
there's
then,
no real planning. They're totally on a reactive state, with the NBA and the NHL, as far as I'm concerned. And there's no right or wrong reaction because you don't really know what the next step of this is, right?
correct.
So,
But Calgary today announced that no Flames and no Stampeders games before June 30th.
Yeah.
So
And that's
that
right
means
now.
no preseason
By
games.
June, they may change, right?
Right. But that's what I mean. Right. But not before that date. So
Oh,
when
yeah.
do you
We know
start
for sure
training
there's at
camps?
least
When do you
those
start
two.
preseason
Did they
games? When do you start these seasons? Like, you got to start calling. You got to let players
And at what
know.
point-
And, like, there's 2 weeks of logistical nightmares just to get all your players in line before you can even start a training camp. So when do you think is that drop dead date where they go, okay, we're going to start the league and it's going to start on X date? Is it Labor Day for you guys?
Potentially. I mean, the other part of that though too is, and I know Toronto did the same thing where they canceled all their, big events and stuff, and they made the exception for sports. If you're in a declared state of an emergency in a city, Calgary, Toronto, it means something, but it actually means jack shit. Because if the province says we're open, they can get rid of your state of emergency. They can supersede you.
True.
We saw it happen here. Regina tried to do that, and the Saskatchewan government said, "Nah, I don't think you guys are doing that." Everybody needs to basically have simple, straightforward messaging that covers the entire province. We got this. And I agree with that. It's kind of a bit of a bully tactic, but I mean, at a certain point, it's like, okay, we're going to manage it. We have the resources to manage it, a Ministry of Health, and they have the health agencies all answering to them. What does a city have answering to them in those regard? Nothing.
So you think
what does it
that
really mean?
there'll actually
Nothing.
be something going on in Calgary before June 30th?
If the provincial government says, hey, we're ready to rock the social distancing and everything else, we're going to relax all the rules, we can get back. If they said that they could go back to normal, what the hell's Calgary going to do? Keep enforcing them, their own rules? They would pull that out. They'd pull that away. I mean, it can be done. I mean, they're doing it to cover their ass right now, so people can plan for all those days, right? City workers, Flames, whoever, right? They can sort out their lives a little bit, but I wouldn't say that's an absolute nothing's going to happen kind of date.
They can hand out
It can be
rider branded
subject to
N95
change.
masks at all the games.
in Calgary.
No, anywhere. Because, well, if games are going on in Calgary, they'll be going on here, right? You kind of can't start a league without the league.
Right.
Even though we'll get to them later, the NBA is going to try and do whatever the hell they can do to try and make things happen. But
Right.
what other CFL stuff do we got?
I think that was pretty much it as far as I could tell.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah, I
slow.
don't think there was too much else.
Nothing really gets me all fired up beyond that, I guess. So, you guys want to talk a little NFL?
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah, you do. Might as well. Okay, before we get it too far into this, did you read at all about how the Buccaneers had a code word for recruiting Tom Brady within the organization?
No? What was it?
Yeah.
Was it something to do with
Tell you in a
goats?
second here. No, I just thought it was funny because it's like, well, basically the only person in the building you wouldn't want to find out is who? Winston, because he's the guy out on his ass, right? Just don't talk about it around him. Like, I don't know, a code name for the pursuit of Tom Brady seems a little bit too...
It's all fake news. It's phony stuff.
Yeah,
It didn't
holy
happen.
shit. What was the
Kind of
name?
sounds like Operation Overlord or something, right?
Operation Shoeless Joe Jackson is what it was called.
Oh, my God.
All right.
So the director
Wow.
of player personnel was a former teammate of Brady's at Michigan, is the story. And he's a big Field of Dreams movie buff. kind of guy. So you're kind of like, come up with something fucking cooler, man. Like, I don't know that you needed one, but yeah, Operation Goat. I don't know. Yeah, I
if you're gonna come up with a code name, come up with something better than that.
Yeah, make it cool. Dumbass. Make it cool. Exactly. I saw it. I was just like, that's pretty funny. Super lame. Anyway, we're talking virtual draft.
Virtual draft.
Apparently, I just saw that today.
So is it? I couldn't tell. Is it going to be the same dates as the draft was set for before? So then it sounds like the Above Average Joe's podcast is going to have a draft show probably on the 20th then. Right?
So in like 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
I might have to do some homework.
What happens on April 20th? Nothing that I can think of.
I'm not sure.
420, yeah. You know, you don't have to wait for that day, Maddie. It's the whole month is 420.
And we're all stuck in our houses.
Yes.
You know that, right?
Yeah.
Self-isolation.
Explain that to us, yeah.
Shit. I mean.
Yeah, thank you, coronavirus.
Where you have to be. Yeah, thanks, coronavirus. 420 can be enjoyed daily at home. No, they said some of these teams are getting their war rooms together and things of that nature. Sean Payton, actually, they took a little bit of flack from a beat reporter who was giving them shit because they're going to a local pub to set up, but apparently it's not. They're like, well, restaurants are closed, and it's like, oh my God, what a jackass the reporter was. But I mean, they're not going there to fucking piss it up and just throw darts at a board. Yeah, let's pick that guy. Like, no. They're setting up
except
there
the Browns.
There's space and the Browns, yeah, you know.
They might
pick swirls around the bowl 4 times. We'll pick it. Yeah, but he's.
Hey, Bo. Thanks for joining us.
They were in the process of setting up the location so that they could do it, right? So, you know, all good. Because all the team facilities are actually shut down right now. The NFL ordered them shut down. So if you can't go into your team facility, what do? You got to set up somewhere else. So they're setting up at this pub, which is probably a good thing for the pub because it's probably not that full most nights.
Not at all. Did I read right? They're allowed to interview and do some things with players via like video stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I mean, not that it's the same as being in person, but I mean, if you can't be there in person, it's the next best thing. So if you can see the kid work out, all good. Guys who actually went to the combine and got all their times and stuff, that's going to be a big bonus potentially because you want to hand time it or time it yourself if you're the scout or the player personnel guy right there at the pro day. You don't want to rely on what's being provided to you. Some of these guys, maybe them, their agent, the school, whatever, may have a reason to bullshit you. Yeah. As to what some of the numbers are.
Yeah, those type of ones.
Time maybe is what I'm thinking.
That type of stuff's going to be tough, like time stuff. But watching how a guy moves and stuff
like
is still good at least to watch that, and you can still interview a guy, which is probably the most important.
The interview part is exactly. The one that I think is the hardest in my estimation is still the doctors and getting these guys in to do a medical. You know,
like Tua.
Especially him.
And maybe this is an opportunity for all these teams to work together a little bit because I mean, if you're trying to get a kid who's a California boy or whatever, and you're a New York team, say for instance, you can't fly him in. You're not going to bring him over. Maybe you get a team doctor that you trust from UCLA or, you know, they have connections. They have ways, or another team, you know, get their team doctor to MRI him. But, I mean, I wouldn't want to know all of that stuff coming via, say, you're the Chargers and your team doctor.
Somebody you trust.
I don't know if I'm the Giants picking close to the Chargers if I want them knowing who I'm getting medicals on. It may change how the draft goes for you a little bit. So, you know, I would look to colleges or even just doctors and stuff that I trust to maybe do it on our behalf. at least you have something. That would be my biggest concern, though. Tua being that guy, right, with the hip and everything
That's reasonable.
else. You're making a pretty big investment picking a guy,
especially if you're
especially at that
you're moving
position.
up. Especially if you're one of the teams that are considering moving up and spending a lot of draft capital.
Yeah. But I mean, still, even if you're not moving up and you're picking in the top 10, that's a premium pick, man. You don't want to screw that up, and you don't want to screw up a quarterback pick either. So that's how GMs get their ass fired. So, and now, right or wrong, those guys are going to be judged by who they pick in this draft. They're not going to let them have that excuse of, well, the COVID thing. And
yeah, but the odds are they're going to screw up, though.
Dealt with it. You dealt with it shitty, or you're fired, right? So
the numbers say they're going to screw it up anyways.
Well, everybody's going to screw up at some point. But if you screw up enough times, you have the opportunity to succeed, right? That's the secret to genius.
The screw-ups to me could come from two different places, or the big wins too, is if you had a scouting staff that was out there during the last season and doing the footwork, right? They were in the trenches. You might have a lot of info on a lot of guys, that already makes your board a lot better than other ones, right? So and you're going to maybe see where some of these GMs maybe don't have a great board, or the owner just walks in. It's like, well, this guy's the most newspaper clippings. Pick him. Right?
Well, that's the great thing about football is it's more than one guy, and even the best player in the world, if put in a bad situation with a bad team and bad coaching, he may not turn into anything. It happens.
Yeah. Well, you can go from average to awesome pretty quick just by coaching. I think,
absolutely.
Considering not just the NFL, but a lot of leagues, coaching's going to be the big advantage. NFL, CFL, NBA, all of them. Even baseball. Like when you got these abbreviated, messed up, chaotic situations, coaching is going to matter. It's going to matter big.
Oh, for sure. And what about all the coaches that? What about all the coaches that are new with teams like McCarthy and Riverboat Ron, and you can't install anything. You can't be working your roster, checking out these guys now that you've got the job before you go into the draft. Like it's got to be.
How many guys are out there though too that are football savants and they can scheme their way through a game to cover for talent, not just deficiencies, but guys that aren't quite ready for games though too, right? If it's abbreviated. I think of a Belichick, a Tomlin, guys who are really smart football guys.
Right, but he knows his roster.
Who can scheme a little better. Well, true. But
and that's really important.
A little better to get through it. Right?
Yeah, but if you know your roster, you know what you can do. Because he's gonna know the guys on the practice roster as good as he knows his starters. Whereas, say a guy like McCarthy taking over Dallas, all he knows of Dallas is the film he's watched. He's probably hasn't got to work with a single player yet.
Well, but if he's a coach of any kind of quality and knows what he's doing, you're not coming in week one going, I want the whole playbook, or fuck it ain't worth it. He's going to come in and just work on some basic stuff that he knows that roster should be able to do, and then slowly build on it. They do that anyway, but it's going to be super abbreviated.
Well,
and they should probably know enough about the roster to go, well, I think we could probably run a few more trap runs, or we can run a few more sweeps. We should be able to do that well.
Dallas might not have been the best example because I believe they're keeping the whole of the staff, right? Like they kept most of the staff, right? Close. So, yeah, it's a little different.
But I mean, even a guy like Gruden's a pretty seasoned coach. He knows what he has to some degree, but he knows what they don't have to work on a ton to come out of the gate, right? Like, you got a roster that can run outside zone runs.
For sure.
You're going to run a few more of them just because we didn't get the reps. So if we're going to use reps,
keep it simple.
Use it on getting shit that we know we should be able to execute.
Preseason
football.
Might
make for some real make for some boring football to start.
Yeah, so you don't have a preseason. You just the first two games are your preseason.
Right. It's just
something like
everybody's in the same boat. They've got to make the best of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does
We'll
suck,
see.
but yeah, you're right. Everybody has to go through it, so suck it up, right?
Yeah. Well, and I always look back to like even when I played hockey and stuff, right? You get out there and it's like, oh, you're playing, a championship game, or you're playing a provincial game, or whatever, playoffs. And it's like you come in the room and your head coach will be like, yeah, well, it was the shitty ice. We're on the same fucking ice as them. How can the ice be our excuse but not their excuse? We played on the same ice. That's not a valid excuse. They overcame the shitty ice. We didn't. Why didn't we?
Yeah, the field was awful.
We're too busy making fucking excuses rather than playing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem, right? Like, I hate that crap. And even when I coach, young kids, some people are predisposed to excuses, like big time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's just loser speak. It's basically saying, I'm not too sure if I can win. Well, if you're not too sure, you're probably not going to. Not often enough, anyway. Like, overcome it. Figure out a way.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, like the perfect example is the image from 1989 Grey Cup of that long pass to Jeff Fairholm with the guy draped over his back, and the flag comes out and he keeps running for the touchdown, right? It's like, yeah, I got interfered with, but I caught the damn ball anyways.
Yeah, exactly. You call your penalties, you do whatever, right? Like even the blaming the ref thing, right? Like, I'm not here to play games and take dives and hopefully get calls. I'm here to play, and I'm going to play. So, anyway, it's not whether you win or lose. It's how you played the game, right?
No.
If you're not first, you're last.
That's right. If you're not first, you're last.
If you're not first, you're last.
Robin's race.
So, I don't know. I don't know how many people are going to be able to tune in. I think they're going to probably get a fair amount of people tuning in. You may be shocked with how many people tune into a virtual draft, but it's probably twofold. They're craving any kind of...
Well, that's the thing. People are just craving any kind of new
forward,
content, right?
Right. So, I mean, in that regard, I think it would be a pretty unique, but also fun and positive sign for people. Speaking on sort of the sign of it, I guess, though, too, is, 13 leagues had a conference call with Trump. And basically, he said, well, yeah, the NFL, he thinks it should be able to start on time.
He says it's going to start on time.
And that's all well and good. And I mean, it's not that he knows anything more than anybody else in some regard, because nobody really knows when it's going to end or when it's going to be safe. But at the same time, we don't also know what capacity any of these would come back in either, right? Fan-free stadiums or...
That's the only way I see it coming back.
But I mean...
I did hear some proposals like that.
Either, but I mean, at the same time, you also have to consider, though, too, and I know there's a certain amount of people that are mocking him for saying it, though, too, because he can't know or he doesn't know for sure. But at the same time, I mean... when you have a leader who's got the platform that he does, pick a country, right? If he just comes out and gets on the microphone, he's like, guess what, guys? We're fucked. What does that do, right? Like, he kind of has to be a salesman of hope. Like, there has to be some optimism as to we're going to get there.
Wow, the messenger is really terrible.
I don't know when, but we got to have some optimism that is fed to people. Otherwise, they're going to lose their mind, right? Like, they're talking mental.
They're going to take all the toilet paper.
Going to go off the frickin'. Well, mental health's already suffering for some people. There you go. But I mean, you've got to sell some kind of hope and optimism to people, though, too, right?
For sure.
Like, you can't just be. He can't say if he says the inverse of it, it's just that's sheer lunacy right there, as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, if he's anything, he's a good salesman. He's a salesman. That's what he is. So he's done it his whole life. That's what he excels at. So
used car salesman, yeah.
Fair enough, but I mean, when he wants to sell something, he can sell it, and that's what I think he's trying to sell.
To some people,
more than just the leagues coming back, is he's selling the idea of some semblance of normal life coming back, some kind of hope. So to me, yeah, I was critical of it too, because it's like there's no fucking way you can know that. But at the same time, there is a bit of an underlying message though too that everybody just wants to get back to normal.
I still come
But
back. Sorry, man.
a couple of weeks ago, though, I mean, it was April 12th, right? Easter, we were all going to be happy and smiling and free again. Like, he has
True.
no idea. Nobody has any
True.
idea.
Nobody does, and that's kind of the thing. I know, we get Canadian media and we get American media, so there's that comparative factor, though, too.
Yes, and it makes me glad
mean-
again that I'm Canadian and not American.
To some degree, yeah. I mean, for sure.
Not
But
every degree.
I think there's certain things, though, too, that every country's fucked up in some capacity. They either didn't take it serious enough, they didn't do it soon enough, they weren't prepared enough. They, whatever it is, every country has had some bit of their laces tied together on this and tripped a little. Now, how bad you trip and how bad you fall, ask Italy. They
True.
tripped and fell, and they smashed all their teeth out on the curb, or they fell out with as older people,
Yes.
as they have. The dentures flew out. But I mean,
The ones that were flaunting
nobody's
how it was
perfect,
no
right?
big deal, it's just the flu, though, and then those are the ones that have the worst problems.
Seems it, yeah.
okay, well,
it's
and
that
just to
part of
play
it
devil's
that,
advocate, though, just to play devil's advocate, though, our leader didn't say that, but our health officials did. They actually told Canadians who said close the borders and shut down the incoming planes that they were being racist in February. And what did they do 2 weeks later? Shut it all down. So, it's unfortunate, though, that the leader of the country says the stuff. But, I mean, every country has one or two players on that top scale, on that top stage, who said shit that's dumb or misguided or a little off kilter, right? And that's why I said, like in the one previous podcast, you can shit on Trudeau if you don't like him. You can shit on Trump, but there isn't one country that has not tripped up in some way. So, like, just get past the idea that it was going to be a perfect anything for anyone. It isn't. It isn't. This isn't ideal as to how we want to live either. So making the best of it.
Keeping it back to sports. So how do you, without a vaccine, how do you put 30,000 plus people in sports stadiums? How do you do it?
You have to wait to a point where you achieve herd immunity at that point, I would think, right? Yeah. If you don't have a vaccine, your only other option is herd immunity.
Right, and that's could take 18 months, could be a couple seasons,
herd immunity
right?
Doesn't actually happen unless a large part of you get it.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, you have to let it run its course.
You can't
not in short order.
Months.
Well,
it does actually prove more effective in short order than the long term. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but to get to herd immunity is usually that 70-75% number have had it. Well,
70 is what I heard exactly what they were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's that
number,
it's that 5% that are going to die in that herd immunity.
That's the hardest part.
Right.
Right. So how fast do you try to attain herd immunity? And herd immunity
no faster, hopefully, than our health system can handle it.
Right, and that's the whole balancing act, because our economy can't maybe handle the same pace. Somehow you have to synchronize those two and figure out a way to do so, because you can't go 2 years with the current economic setup we have right now with things being shut down. It just wouldn't. It's not sustainable. How long it's sustainable?
I think it would just change.
I'm not sure.
They're talking 4 months is kind of what the government
I think the
is
economy
looking at.
I think our economy would just shift, Heath. I don't think our economy would die. I think it would go into a recession.
We're talking a 25% reduction in GDP. That is epic recession.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think
it doesn't mean everything just ceases to exist.
No, but there's also the fact that a lot of stuff can't be done due to safety reasons. You can't just shift because you can't just go back to work, even if it's a different job. There's a different societal expectation.
Exactly. Our society will change. The jobs we do, which is going to happen anyway. This is this is going way off sports,
It'll
but this
be
is a turning point in our
Mhm.
society.
Absolutely.
This is going to
It
be
is.
normal.
Maybe not. We, like we're saying with the national leaders, we can't predict the future. I mean, we're all going to take our bumps and trip, but to me, the one great part about the human race is not just the technology so we can do this, but it's also so we can come up with solutions to problems.
Absolutely.
And medical science being what it is, I mean, if I have to bet on one field, pulling our collective asses out of the fire, I would probably bet on medicine.
Right.
They're pretty damn
But who
good.
says we're
done some
supposed to
pretty
go back
miraculous
to
shit.
the system that we were working with? Maybe this is a time to change that system.
The social system, but the economic system's not going to change any day soon. The economic structure is not going to change any day soon.
The economic
It's too deep-rooted.
drivers will
drivers
change. That's what's going to change when it comes to the economy. It's not going to be
But-
the oil sector. It's not going to be some of these other
it'll be
things.
the oil sector. It'll be the oil sector. You can't get rid of oil. You can't.
Not get rid of
That's
it,
a
but it's not going to be your
priority.
driver. It can't be the driver
If you don't
forever.
have- it's not the driver. It's 12 to 15% of GDP in Canada.
Right.
So
So
it's
it's
an important
not the
It's an
driver.
important market. It's a very important market
For sure.
because there's a lot of spin-off off of it. So
There's lots of
The other
spin-off
part
of
of it is, though, too,
anything
is you
that's
can't-
doing
you
well and
can't-
bringing in money. There's spin-offs from, so it has nothing to do with like whatever
Well, just-
whatever
there's
whatever
also
the
social
economy
aspects
shifts
of it.
to. That's also going to bring money in
we
economic
can't
spin-offs.
shift to vegetable farming anymore because the social distancing factors are pretty significant on vegetable farming. You can't always sustain that, right? Vegetable farming is not really an industry that can maybe adhere to all the same safety standards that are being put in right now. So we just
Robots.
stop growing vegetables?
Robots.
We don't have them. Who's
They'll
making them?
they'll be on their way. They're making robots all the time, man. Robots are being made and used. If
can't get robots
if the
to
economy
plant wheat
shows a
yet.
spot
They're
where
not gonna
somebody
do
can
it
make
by-
something,
Right.
Robots
But that also
will
means
be
somebody
made
has to
now.
go in the factory and somebody has to bring in the parts to make it. They can't even do that.
Oh man, I wish I had some popcorn right now.
So I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just there are hurdles we can't actually clear, mostly because we can't actually get out of this whole health rules situation.
right? But I think this is going to change habits, which in then turn change our economy and just how we all live.
I actually think the biggest habit that's going to change is people aren't living on credit. They're not going to spend money. That's where the recession is so scary,
Mm-hmm.
right? But how do you
Yeah,
convince
remember
people
the message in
our
our
age, for
spend your way
instance,
out, right?
Right. And I mean, that's the problem. And like our last provincial leader here said, when it comes to deficits, they're like a bag of potato chips. I bet you can't have just one. You can't just run one deficit and be out of the woods. It usually ends up meaning you run multiple deficits. You know, it's the digging your own grave theory. The best way to do it is to just stop digging.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just stop digging, the fucker collapses on you too.
Sometimes you got to let it collapse on you.
Well, and that's what I think is going to ultimately happen from this. I think we're going to go back to a lot of the same structure and things but we're just going to be a lot more responsible with it. My grandparents' generation, my grandparents, half their paycheck would go in the bank. The first half is
I
for
was
me,
just thinking
and then I
that,
spend
yeah.
the other half on other stuff. People don't do that. And people our age and younger have never been adamant on banking money.
Right, because
live
we've
on
been
the
trained.
Post-war generation was huge.
Well, yeah,
right,
but
right.
but to keep
it's totally ingrained and it's totally encultured in us. And
right to keep your economy going, we need to spend
change.
at all costs. We live in a
But- Always,
consumer-driven
always.
society. If we don't
And you
spend,
can
the
still be a
economy doesn't keep
consumer.
going.
You can still be a consumer and save
And
money.
everything
You
keeps
just
growing.
can't be quite as big of a consumer.
Right, but if we're not
that's
consuming
what they're
more
gonna
and
try
more
to
and
do,
more,
is
those
encourage
numbers aren't going up, up, and up. See, that's the thing. It's got to keep growing. So when can you not
Yeah,
grow
but
anymore?
if you
Because I've run out of credit, I can't keep the economy
you can't
going.
just print more money. But that's the theory now.
Well, that's what we're doing as countries.
Every
Yeah, that's
country's
what you
doing
do.
it in this situation.
Absolutely.
That's the crazy part.
Right.
So
That's how you
if
sustain infinite growth.
well, you print more money, but if everybody's printing more money, does it really devalue your money? Is sort of the argument some people are making. And I'm like,
Well, yeah.
yeah, but it also means that the country that comes back from it the fastest and the hardest is probably the one that's the best off. So it's really your rebound, your answer, your solution after you took it on the chin, because everybody's taking it on the chin. It's
The
unavoidable.
race to rebound. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And the only way to
By that.
rebound out of something like this, a recession, the last recession was kicked up because the government spent money. It got it all going, right? So then it was the spin-off, the roll-off, right? The downward effect of recycled dollars, circulated dollars. That's great. It got us out of the jam. But then all of a sudden, over time, every time there's a recession, what is it? Government stimulus. That doesn't work. It
Short term.
does for short term.
Short term.
And that's the fucking problem, is everybody's running on a 4-year cycle. Maybe less if you're a minority. You can't run on the 4-year cycle. Laws and rules have to be changed. So there's limits to this shit. Because people right now are going to have to figure out how to do more with less in their life, because they're maybe not going to be as gainfully employed in some instances. And you can't live off the government. Apparently 4 months is really the plan they have. Well, if it goes 18 months, then what? And we're talking 82 billion in Canada for 4 months. What's 18 months going to cost? And how many more things get shut off?
So if the government's giving everybody money for 4 months because they're not going to be out of work because of this, what does that take us to? Labor Day? August
It takes us to
sometime?
August. Yeah. Yeah.
Roughly.
So how,
Yep.
if they're
So that's
expecting the
a starting
economy
point.
doesn't start driving back again till then, back to a sports
That's
topic.
a minimum. Yeah.
Once again, how do you get things rolling? And then at that point, you're just going to start easing things. And I just still don't see how you're going to congregate all those people. Even if we're allowed
big
to go back
gatherings,
to a semi-normal life, I just don't see
You're not-
how you're going to
I don't
smack
think
a
you
bunch
can
of people in a
congregate on the
stadium.
grand scale. I
Right.
don't think
So
you
how
can
does
congregate
how
on
does
that
a
grand
league
of
like
a
the
scale
CFL
until there's a vaccine?
How does a league like the CFL go? Because they can't do the no players or no people in the stadium. They just can't.
No, they need the revenue.
Well, and if they
the
do
revenue
this,
drives
if they do,
the CFL.
Right.
Gate revenue.
so maybe there's the social distancing every second seat.
Have you?
Maybe
Well,
they can get to
I know
that.
you don't go to as many
I don't know
football
what it
games
is.
as I used to, Heath. But have you ever tried to get in and out to go get a beer or a hot
Oh,
dog or
true.
take a piss?
Yeah.
There is no social distancing except if you have one person at one end and one person at the other, and then every probably third row because they're all stacked really close together because they're on the deep incline. Like, yeah, it's
There's no.
you
it
could maybe
can't be
fit
practically
1,000
done.
people in there,
Right.
maybe.
Well, maybe you file in a certain order. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but it's going to be the same way as they took it all away. It's going to be graduated, right?
Right.
It's going to
So
be, okay, we can only put 100 in, then 1,000 in, and then 10,000, and then 30,000. You'll never get back to the full or even a half full stadium, as far as I can tell, in my estimation. And this is just purely speculatory off the top of my head. I don't think you can get back to that until you have a vaccine.
right. So this season for all major sports, this next coming up season will probably not happen in front of live crowds.
Live crowds.
I think
Yeah.
NHL and NFL will go next season and NBA no matter what, but it probably won't be in arenas filled with people.
True, and they got TV
Weird.
contracts that cover the player costs, right? Like the NFL, their TV.
Oh, the
contract
NFL,
gives
yeah,
the-
they-
Yeah.
those guys actually
Absolutely,
make
yep.
money.
But you talk
Yeah,
about
the TV to
economic
the player
drivers.
contracts.
You talk about economic drivers, and yes, those
Oh,
sports
yeah, that's
leagues will be
another-
fine because of their TV contracts. But what about everybody who works in the arenas, every restaurant and bar that's around those arenas? They put all these new arenas in downtown spots for that reason.
And they've developed the area around it for those same reasons, right? So,
Big time.
to me,
Wow.
there's going to be casualties to this fight. That's unfortunately, I think, one of them. There's probably more jobs in social media or things of that nature with some of these players though too, right? Like when you think about how are you going to watch a CFL game? Maybe you've got all kinds of new ways to get that content to your fans, streaming on multiple platforms. Some of these leagues are really shitty.
Yeah, I wonder what was in this new contract
to their business. So
for external sources
like
other than TSN.
the NHL with Rogers and everything else. Rogers paid a shitload of money, and part of the reason they paid all that money is they thought, geez, we're going to do all this digital content. Their digital content blows chunks. It is nowhere near good enough, and it is nowhere near enough to justify the money they spent.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So now they're going to have to come up with ways to not just to generate money for these clubs, but also to present the content. I mean, we work at a big telco, right? The amount of data that is driving through our network is like, it's exponential growth. There are people who have the technology, in North America, we're just talking North American sports, they have a way to access it. Phones, computers, whatever. These leagues have to figure out a way to get on those platforms, make it more available, have more contracts, more content. They can get their dollars back up, but it's still going to come at the cost of humans in the stadium selling peanuts, whatever it is, right? So there is a downside, but I think for the leagues, it would be a definite learning opportunity for content, as far as I'm concerned.
Did you check out any of the WWF that was on the weekend without a crowd? I watched some highlights. I watched some highlights.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird. I think football is going to be weird. Basketball will be insanely weird without a crowd.
Yeah, and see, the thing with the WrestleMania stuff is, it's a bit scripted, right?
For sure.
And without the fans screaming and yelling around it, there's nothing to distract you from what's going on in any way, shape, or form, right?
It's kind of like watching these late night hosts try and do their monologues in their living rooms without anybody to laugh at them. That's what it feels like, and it's like it's.
So now they have to be actually funny.
No, Seth Meyers really struggles.
It's still
Meyers
different.
isn't funny, though.
It's still different. I think he's pretty funny. I think he does the best Trump.
Well, he only has one joke.
But I'm a musician. Matt's a musician. When you play to nobody, it's weird.
Makes a difference.
It's weird. Yes,
right.
You could still do it. It's still fun. It's still
and yes,
trying to give it your all. But when you've got a venue filled with people, it is something completely different. And I'm assuming that the game itself is going to suffer if they're playing to empty buildings.
To some degree,
It's like watching those Olympic games sometimes when two teams are playing that nobody has any representatives from at the Olympic Games, so the arena's empty, but they're still
get
playing
behind them.
But there's nobody there.
I know what you're talking about.
And it's you can hear every little noise. It's like watching a practice, like going to watch your kids practice kind of thing, like a scrimmage.
Or watching when they have the World Juniors overseas, the preliminary rounds against the smaller teams are just empty.
Yes, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's weird.
See, to me, like you talk of the WWE and even as artists yourself, as musicians, to me, if there's no crowd around, all of a sudden now you have to as a fan, as a spectator, you really end up zeroing in because there's no spectacle anymore. you end up zeroing in on the talent, the artistry that is still prevalent in front of your nose. And that's where you see, some of these late night hosts, they're not actually that good at telling jokes.
I disagree, man. I disagree.
Kind of spurring on the atmosphere.
There's no substitute for energy, man. There's no substitute for energy.
Oh, for sure.
It's the difference between how teams play at home and on the road. When you play at home, you have your energy.
Yeah.
It's you can't discount the power of it, man. You can't.
Oh, I'm not discounting the power of it, but I mean in terms of your eye and what it gets trained on, there's no, like, for something like the WWE, it really doesn't have much artistry to it. Like, it's not like the Sweet Science or UFC or other things where these guys, it's not scripted. There's a real science behind it. There's a real artistry to being good at it. And the same with even joke telling or being a musician. All of a sudden, that artistry, that pure natural ability is the only thing your eye can really see in the whole situation. There's nothing spurning you on. There's no spectacle around you. Like, that hometown crowd cheers you on and gets you jacked up. If they're not there, now you just got to play by talent, not adrenaline, right? Like,
for sure. I'm not saying that the players don't have to change the way they play, but I'm telling you that the quality of the play is going to suffer, and
for sure.
And people are going to notice the difference. Will they watch? Absolutely, because there's nothing else to watch, and would rather watch an arena filled with no people but players than nothing at all. So, but it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same.
No, it's not. It's not. But I mean, everybody's going to have to just adjust and, do their waiting game until it does get back to a semblance of what it once was, right? Or back to what it once was. But in terms of like what you're saying with even like the late night hosts, I mean, some guys are maybe not that good or that funny in some ways, but then you see guys who've got real charisma, like a Jimmy Fallon, it comes to mind. That guy could do anything with anyone, and it's just the way he is. It's more entertaining, right? I'd listen to Dave Chappelle with an empty room and a microphone for 2 hours because he doesn't really need a crowd. It helps him, but that dude would just be entertaining on his own because of how he is, right? So
if he was standing in a room all by himself, I bet he wouldn't have a lot of fun doing it, though.
No, true, but you
not
imagine the shit he would say?
Not everybody is like you, Heath, that they're entertained by their own voice. Oh, was somebody talking? Oh, that was me. Oh, I'm glad I'm still here.
Awesome. So you had something about NBA's going to do like an
H.O.R.S.E.
a H.O.R.S.E.
Yeah. They did E-Sports already. I think it's in process. I think the E-Sports is in process. Apparently, Steph Curry's going to do a game of H.O.R.S.E. or something like that with a challenge or something like that with some other players. It'll be all remote and stuff, right? So,
right. So
I mean, that's kind of cool. But you know what?
It's something, right? It's something.
I can't remember the last time I heard this much talk about WrestleMania. Like not just here in the last few minutes, but just like, oh my God, because everybody is so starved.
Because it was the only thing. It was the only thing on the weekend.
Right. So I mean, you touch on rebroadcasting of games. It's okay, but it gets old fast. Like, you kind of want new stuff.
Yeah, no.
The thrill of the unexpected is, still kind of what you tune in for, right? So, I mean, I don't want to watch the 87 Oilers ad nauseum, but yeah. Speaking of that kind of stuff, though, Maddie's just flipping around there.
Yeah, I know. He's like really messing with my juju here.
He had the people's eyebrow kind of going there.
I can't even see. Hey, there's Kyle. Yeah.
See, now I got
all good.
A rebranding.
My Wi-Fi was flaking out. Sorry, so I switched it to the phone.
That's okay. People got got to see the names move in real time, so you guys changed sides. Not that anybody's hitting anybody up on Twitter, but if you really want to get a little raged out every once in a while, hit at Heath Degelman up on Twitter. He's always up for a little bit of a
good argument.
little bit of a battle.
It's actually at H. Degelman.
Is it at H. Degelman? Well,
Yeah.
then whoever's at Heath Degelman has been getting a lot of Twitter hate mail, and they're wondering why. So we're in. Okay, so
So good.
everybody out there, this is show 17, and I'm pretty sure he's watched these shows back, and this is the first time
Couple times, yeah.
he's corrected me on it.
You got my name. You got my name wrong. Like, what was that?
Three
One or
times.
two?
Three times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have my own little inside joke.
Well, I
where
wonder who
something else
at
is
Heath
wrong, but then-
Degelman is
yeah.
now. I have to find out who that guy is. He probably hates
Nobody,
our show.
because I actually believe I had a Twitter account, and then I needed to sign into it, and I did not know the password, and I just said, whatever, fuck it. Never got back to it, and then when I wanted to go, it was really early
Taken.
on. So I think
Locked up.
I'd made like a second name because I couldn't get into the first one. It was all locked down.
Right.
So anyway, whatever.
Well, now I know.
Whatever. It's probably locked in Twitter jail, and they think they got me, but nothing keeps no jail will ever hold the heater.
Nobody keeps
So-
baby in a corner.
There you go. There you go.
Oh,
All good. Yeah. Smack me one on Twitter. I'm good.
good
It's all
show.
good.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think that's been a pretty good show.
Yeah, I'm tired. I want to go downstairs and have a rye. I
Yeah.
was up at 4 this morning.
Well, you're working from
I
home.
didn't get to
I don't
sleep
mind.
You can
until
work
4.
you can run whatever hours you want.
So I had a migraine all yesterday. Like,
Right.
basically wanted to have my head chopped off because it was like, fuck it, throw it away. There's something wrong with it. Get me a new one. Take 2 aspirin, scrub your neck. Beverly Hillbillies, remember that, Granny? Do a head transplant. Okay, anyway, maybe I'm just that old.
You're old.
So I slept a little bit yesterday, more than I normally do. Never really take an afternoon nap. So yeah, I got up at 4 in the morning to a big bump somewhere against or in my house. It woke me up. I don't know what it was. And I couldn't go back to sleep. So I sat in the living room looking out my giant windows into the south and had a cup of coffee. And yeah, it was good. It was fantastic.
Sounds like a wonderful day.
Yeah, it was a good start considering how shitty my day was yesterday. And then I had to work. So.
Well, they can't all be perfect.
They can't all be perfect.
Can't all
but-
be perfect. But
Well,
you don't appreciate a good one until you have a bad one. So.
that's right.
This is true.
Well, that's episode 17, guys. We're getting close to that big 2-0. So until next week, everybody stay safe and take care of everybody out there. I'm Kyle. Up above me is
I'm Heath.
Heath. And over here,
I'm Matt.
Matt. And we'll catch you guys next time. Laters.
Laters.
Laters.